Today I'll be doing the same thing I did yesterday. Just use ChatGPT to study. I'm gonna stay here for 1 hour and a half. Just wait to see if it's streaming. Okay. This time I already did a bunch of inputs here. I'm doing this file here, which was one of the files of these ones. And this, if I remember correctly, came from a video where I wrote down everything that the person recommended to know, to study about programming in general. So I'm gonna be putting all these topics on ChatGPT and see what outputs it gives me, because probably I wasn't going to spend time researching this myself anyway. So I think ChatGPT is a good way to study all of this stuff in a fast way. And the ones that I did so far are things about metadata, accessible HTML, SVG basics, and then understanding SAS and BMM methodology and selectors, CSS selectors. So I'm going to put the text to speech, and then I'm going to reset the thread after I get done with all of this, and then I'm going to continue in this list here on the ones that are not read.
Fast API is a modern, fast, high-performance web framework for building APIs with Python 3.6 plus based on standard Python type hints. Fast API is built on top of Starlet for the web parts and Pedantic for the data parts. Fast API is built around the concept of dependencies. Each function that is added to the API is called a dependency and is a Python function that takes some inputs, called dependencies as well, and returns a value. Fast API uses the Python type hints to declare the inputs and outputs of these functions. This allows Fast API to automatically generate an open API schema for the API and validate the data being passed to and from the API. Fast API also includes support for automatic data conversion, serialization, and automatic API documentation using the Open API specification. To use Fast API, you define your API dependencies as regular Python functions and then add them to the Fast API instance using the @app_get, @app_post, etc. decorators. These decorators specify the HTTP method and route for the API endpoint. Here is a simple example of a Fast API app that has a single endpoint that takes a query parameter and returns a string. From FastAPI import FastAPI app equals FastAPI @app_get / def read route return hello world @app_get /items /itemid def read item itemid int q str equals none return itemid itemid q q. In this example, the read route function is the dependency for the /root and the read item function is the dependency for the /items /itemid route. When the /items /itemid route is called, FastAPI will automatically convert the itemid path parameter from a string to an integer and validate that the query parameter is a string, since it is defined as such in the function signature. Fast API also includes support for handling request data, file uploads, and WebSockets. You can learn more about Fast API and its features on the official Fast API website, https://fastapi.tiangolo.com. Teach me about metadata, viewport metadata, open graph metadata, link to style sheet, link to favicon, how to add Google Analytics or Tag Manager. Metadata is data that provides information about other data. In the context of web development, metadata is often used to provide information about a web page or website. One type of metadata commonly used in web development is viewport metadata. Viewport metadata is a special tag that is placed in the head section of a web page and tells the browser how to adjust the page's dimensions and scaling to fit the user's device. This is especially important for responsive web design, where the same page is displayed on a wide range of devices with different screen sizes and resolutions. Another type of metadata commonly used in web development is open graph metadata. Open graph metadata is a set of tags that are placed in the head section of a web page and provide information about the page, such as its title, description, and preview image. This information is used by social media platforms and other websites to display a preview of the page when it is shared on those platforms. A link to a style sheet is a type of metadata that is used to include a style sheet, a file containing CSS rules, on a web page. This is done by adding a link tag to the head section of the page, like this. A link to a favicon is another type of metadata that is used to specify the small icon that is displayed in the browser's address bar, bookmark menu, and other places. This is done by adding a link tag to the head section of the page, like this. To add Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager to a web page, you need to include the appropriate tracking code in the head or body section of the page. For Google Analytics, this means adding a script tag to the page that loads the Google Analytics JavaScript library, like this. Function, ISOGRAM, I Google Analytics object equals R, IR equals IR function, IR.Q equals IR.Q, .push, arguments, IR.L equals 1 asterisk new date, A equals S.create element, O, M equals S.get elements by tag name, O, 0. A.async equals 1, A.src equals G, M.parent node. Insert before, AM, window document, script, https://www.googleanalytics.com/analytics.js, GA, create, UAXXXXXXXXX, auto, GA, send, page view. For Google Tag Manager, this means adding a
I think I'm gonna copy this code. This is Google Analytics, the other one is Tag Manager. I think it's JS. And this is obviously, not obviously, but this is probably the version after it goes through Webpack, which is a compilation thing with JavaScript. It's an optimization that is done with JavaScript codes, so that is faster when it's on production, I think. And then it changes all the code into these letters here and then does a bunch of things to make the code faster. But it becomes a lot harder to read it. So not sure how useful it is, but I'm gonna save it anyway.
For Google Tag Manager, this means adding a script tag to the page that loads the Google Tag Manager JavaScript library, like this. Function, WDS. To continue with the previous example, to add Google Tag Manager to a web page, you would add a script tag to the head or body section of the page, like this. Function, WDSLI, WL equals WL, WL.push, GTM.start, new date, .getTime, event. In this example, the script tag loads the Google Tag Manager JavaScript library and sets the ID of the Google Tag Manager container, GTMXXXX, that should be used for the page. To finish setting up Google Tag Manager on the page, you would also need to add in a script tag that contains the Google Tag Manager container code, like this. This script tag is used to provide a fallback for users who have disabled JavaScript in their browser. It contains an iframe that loads the Google Tag Manager container code, which will be executed if JavaScript is not available. Overall, metadata is an important aspect of web development, as it provides information about web pages and websites that is used by browsers, search engines, and other services. By including the appropriate metadata in the head section of your web pages, you can ensure that your pages are properly displayed and indexed by these services. Accessible HTML refers to the practice of writing HTML code that is easy for screen readers and other assistive technology to understand and navigate. This is important because it ensures that users with visual impairments or other disabilities can access and use the content on a website. To write accessible HTML, you need to follow some best practices, such as using semantic HTML tags, like for headings and for paragraphs, to structure the content. Providing alternative text for images, and using appropriate attributes, like AriaLabelB and AriaDescribeB, to provide additional information about elements on the page. Here is an example of some accessible HTML that uses semantic tags and alternative text. Hello world. This is a simple page with some text and an image. In this example, the and tags are used to structure the content and make it easy for screen readers to understand the hierarchy of the information. The img tag includes the alt attribute, which provides a text description of the image for screen readers. To learn more about writing accessible HTML, you can check out the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, from the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, at https://www.w3.org/way/standards-guidelines/WCAG. SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, is a vector graphics format that is used to create images that can be scaled to any size without losing quality. SVG images are created using a XML-based markup language, which defines the shapes, paths, and other graphic elements that make up the image. One of the main advantages of SVG is that it is resolution independent, which means that it can be scaled to any size without losing quality. This is in contrast to raster images, like JPEG and PNG, which lose quality when they are scaled up. Another advantage of SVG is that it supports interactivity and animation, which allows you to create dynamic and interactive images that can be controlled with JavaScript. To create an SVG image, you can use a vector graphics editor, like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape, to draw the shapes and paths that make up the image. You can then export the image as an SVG file, which can be included on a web page using the img tag or the object tag, like this. In the first example, the img tag is used to include the SVG image on the page. In the second example, the object tag is used to include the SVG image, with a fallback image, fallback.png, that is displayed if the browser does not support SVG. SVG images can also be inlined directly in the HTML code using the SVG tag, like this. In this example, the SVG tag defines a container for the SVG image and the viewbox, width, and height attributes are used to specify the dimensions of the image. The circle tag is then used to define a circle shape that is filled with the color red. Overall, SVG is a powerful and flexible format for creating vector graphics that can be easily scaled and animated on the web. It is supported by all modern browsers, so you can use it to create high-quality images for your web pages. CSS selectors are used to select the elements on a web page that a CSS rule should be applied to. There are many different types of CSS selectors, and the specific selector that you use will depend on the elements that you want to select and the styles that you want to apply. The most basic CSS selector is the element selector, which selects all elements of a specific type on the page. For example, the A element selector would select all elements, i.e. links, on the page, and the P element selector would select all P elements, i.e. paragraphs, on the page. Another common type of CSS selector is the class selector, which selects all elements with a specific class attribute. The class selector uses a period, dot, followed by the class name to select elements with that class. For example, the dot component class selector would select all elements with the component class, and the dot highlight class selector would select all elements with the highlight class. A more specific type of CSS selector is the child selector, which selects only the direct children of an element that match the specified selector. The child selector uses a greater than sign to separate the parent element from the child element. For example, the dot component a child selector would select all elements that are direct children of a dot component element. This would not select the elements that are nested inside other elements within the dot component element. Overall, CSS selectors are an essential part of working with CSS, as they allow you to target specific elements on a page and apply styles to them. By understanding the different types of CSS selectors and how they work, you can effectively select the elements that you want to style and create well-designed and organized web pages. SAS, short for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, is a CSS preprocessor that adds additional features to CSS, such as variables, nested rules, mixins, and functions, to make it more powerful and easier to use. SAS is compiled into regular CSS, so it can be used in any website or application that uses CSS. One of the key features of SAS is mixins, which allow you to define a group of styles that can be reused throughout your style sheet. Mixins are defined using the @mixin directive, and they can accept arguments like a function to make them more flexible. For example, you could define a mixin to create a flexible box layout like this. @mixin flexbox, $direction, $justify, $align, display, flex direction, $direction, justify content, $justify, align items, $align. To use this mixin, you would include it in a CSS rule using the @include directive, like this. .container @include flexbox, row, space between, center. In this example, the flexbox mixin is included in the .container rule, and the values row, space between, and center are passed as arguments to the mixin. This will generate the following CSS. .container display, flex direction, row, justify content, space between, align items, center. Another powerful feature of SAS is the ability to use loops and conditions in your style sheets. This allows you to generate styles dynamically, based on a set of variables or other conditions. For example,
So it's pretty much like a function, and then you pass the parameters to whatever you want to do, whatever you want it to change when you include. Pretty cool.
For example, you could use a @for loop to generate a series of classes with different font sizes, like this. $font sizes, small, 12px, medium, 16px, large, 24px, at each $name, $size and $font sizes. Font dash hashtag $name font size, $size. In this example, the @each loop iterates over the $font sizes map and generates a .font small, .font medium, and .font large class for each entry in the map. This will generate the following CSS. .font small font size, 12px, .font medium font size, 16px, .font large font size, 24px. SAS also includes support for functions, which allow you to define reusable blocks of code that can be called from anywhere in your style sheet. Functions can accept arguments and return a value, just like regular programming languages. For example, you could define a color contrast function to calculate the contrast ratio between two colors, like this. @function color contrast, $color1, $color2, $lum1, luminance, $color1, $lum2, luminance, $color2, $max, $lum1, $lum2, $min, $lum1, $lum2. To continue with the previous example, the color contrast function calculates the luminance of each color using the luminance function, which is provided by SAS. It then uses the max and min functions to find the maximum and minimum luminance values. Finally, it returns the contrast ratio by dividing the maximum luminance by the minimum luminance and multiplying the result by 1000. Here is an example of how you could use the color contrast function in a SAS style sheet. $primary color, number 333, $secondary color, hashtag FFF, @if, color contrast, $primary color, $secondary color. In this example, the color contrast function is used in an @if statement to determine whether the primary and secondary colors have a low contrast ratio. If the contrast ratio is less than 4.5, the colors are switched so that the primary color is white and the secondary color is black. This ensures that the text is always readable against the background. Overall, SAS is a powerful and popular CSS preprocessor that adds many useful features to CSS, such as mixins, loops, conditions, and functions. By using Sass, you can write more efficient and maintainable style sheets that are easier to work with and more powerful than regular CSS. BAME, block, element, modifier, is a methodology for naming and organizing CSS classes in a web project. BAME is designed to make it easier to understand and maintain large and complex style sheets, by providing a clear and consistent structure for naming CSS classes. In BAME, a block is a standalone component that can be used on its own, such as a button or a form. An element is a part of a block that cannot be used on its own, such as a button label or a form input. A modifier is a variation of a block or element, such as a primary button or a disabled form input. In BAME, the names of CSS classes are constructed using a combination of the block, element, and modifier names, separated by dashes. For example, the CSS class for a primary button would be button primary, and the CSS class for a disabled form input would be form input disabled. Here is an example of some HTML that uses BAME class names. Click me. In this example, the button and form input classes represent the blocks, and the primary and disabled classes represent the modifiers. The button primary and form input disabled classes are the combination of the block and modifier names. BAME is a popular methodology for organizing CSS classes because it provides a clear and consistent structure for naming classes. This makes it easier to understand and maintain large style sheets, and it helps to prevent naming conflicts and other issues that can arise in complex projects. Free research preview, ChatGPT.
I think I'm gonna go over this again, because it's kind of hard to understand.
BAME, block, element, modifier, is a methodology for naming and organizing CSS classes in a web project. BAME is designed to make it easier to understand and maintain large and complex style sheets, by providing a clear and consistent structure for naming CSS classes. In BAME, a block is a standalone component that can be used on its own, such as a button or a form. An element is a part of a block that cannot be used on its own, such as a button label or a form input. A modifier is a variation of a block or
Yeah, so a block standalone component that can be used on its own. An element is part of a block that cannot be used on its own, such as a button label or form. Yeah, this one I don't understand really well, because it's hard to imagine without having the context of situation. So I guess a class would be the form input here. Not really sure.
An element is a part of a block that cannot be used on its own, such as a button label or a form input. A modifier is a variation of a block or element, such as a primary button or a disabled form input. In BAME, the names of CSS classes are constructed using a combination of the block, element, and modifier names, separated by dashes. For example, the CSS class for a primary button would be button primary, and the CSS class for a disabled form input would be form input disabled. Here is an example of some HTML that uses BAME class names. Click me. In this example, the button and form input classes represent the blocks, and the primary and disabled classes represent the modifiers. The button primary and form input disabled classes are the combination of the block and modifier names. BAME is a popular methodology for organizing CSS classes because it provides a clear and consistent structure for naming classes. This makes
Yeah, but the only thing is that it didn't show the element. So the block and modifier I understand, but the element it wasn't very clear.
This makes it easier to understand and maintain large style sheets, and it helps to prevent naming conflicts and other issues that can arise in complex projects. Free research preview.
Okay, next one. Some of these I already know because I studied after I did this spreadsheet, but I still wanna see the output because I think it's interesting. Sorry about that. Oh, let me see something. It's not working. think I'll leave this one for the next, because it's gonna be a different topic.
REST, or Representational State Transfer, is a software architectural style that defines a set of constraints to be used for creating web services. Web services that conform to the REST architectural style, called RESTful web services, provide interoperability between computer systems on the Internet. RESTful web services allow the requesting systems to access and manipulate textual representations of web resources by using a uniform and predefined set of stateless operations. The motivation for using REST is to build web services that are scalable, flexible, and maintainable. RESTful web services can be used by a wide range of clients, including web browsers, mobile devices, and traditional desktop applications. REST is based on several key principles, including the following. Client-server architecture. RESTful web services are based on the client-server architecture, where the server provides access to resources and the client makes requests to access and manipulate these resources. This separation of concerns allows clients and servers to evolve independently, which makes the system more flexible and scalable. Statelessness. RESTful web services are stateless, meaning that the server does not store any state about the client's session on the server side. This means that every request from the client must contain all the information necessary to understand the request, and the server does not use any client context stored on the server side. This simplifies the design of the web services and makes them more scalable. Cacheability. RESTful web services are cacheable, which means that the server can indicate to the client whether a response can be cached or not. This allows clients to cache responses and reduce the number of requests to the server, which improves the performance and scalability of the system. Layered system. RESTful web services are based on a layered system architecture, where the client does not need to know the details of how the request is handled by the server. This allows different layers of the system to evolve independently and makes the system more flexible. Uniform interface. RESTful web services use a uniform interface, which means that all requests to the server have the same syntax and semantics. This makes the web services easy to use and understand, and it allows different components of the system to communicate with each other in a consistent manner. Overall, the REST architectural style provides a set of rules for designing web services that are scalable, flexible, and maintainable. By following these principles, developers can create web services that are easy to use and understand, and that can be accessed by a wide range of clients. Basics of web security. Web security is the practice of protecting websites and web applications from security vulnerabilities and attacks. There are many different aspects to web security, and some of the key concepts and techniques include the following. HTTPS. HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, is a secure version of the HTTP protocol used for communication on the Internet. HTTPS encrypts the communication between the client and the server, which protects the data from being intercepted or modified by third parties. HTTPS is particularly important for websites that handle sensitive information, such as financial transactions and personal data. XSS, cross-site scripting. XSS is a type of attack that involves injecting malicious code into a website. The attacker can use XSS to steal sensitive information, such as user passwords and credit card numbers, or to deface the website. To protect against XSS attacks, developers can use input validation and sanitization to prevent malicious code from being injected into the website. CORS, Cross-Origin Resource Sharing, CORS, is a security feature that allows web servers to specify which domains are allowed to access their resources. CORS prevents attackers from using malicious websites to access sensitive data on other domains. To enable CORS on a website, the server must include the appropriate CORS headers in its responses. OWASP Top 10. The OWASP Top 10 is a list of the most common and critical web security vulnerabilities. The OWASP Top 10 includes vulnerabilities such as injection attacks, cross-site scripting, insecure direct object references, and broken authentication and session management. To protect against these vulnerabilities, developers can follow the OWASP guidance and best practices for secure web development. To fix a website with blocked mixed content, the first step is to identify the source of the mixed content. Mixed content occurs when a website that is loaded over HTTPS includes resources, such as images or scripts, that are loaded over HTTP. This can happen if the website includes hard-coded HTTP URLs, or if it uses third-party resources that are not served over HTTPS. To fix the problem, the website can be modified to use HTTPS URLs for all resources, or to use only secure third-party resources. Additionally, the website can use a security feature called Content Security Policy, CSP, to block mixed content and prevent it from being loaded by the browser. Computer networking is the practice of connecting computers and other devices to share resources and exchange data. There are many different technologies and protocols involved in computer networking, and some of the basic concepts include the following. Firewall. A firewall is a security system that controls the incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predetermined security rules. A firewall can be hardware-based, software-based, or a combination of both. The main purpose of a firewall is to prevent unauthorized access to a network, and to protect the network from malicious traffic and attacks. DNS, Domain Name System, is a system that translates human-readable domain names, such as example.com, into numerical IP addresses that computers can use to communicate with each other. DNS allows users to access websites and other internet resources using easy-to-remember names instead of complex IP addresses. Private vs. Public IP. Every device on a network has a unique IP address that is used to identify and communicate with the device. A private IP address is an address that is used within a private network, such as a home or office network. A public IP address is an address that is used on the internet and is visible to other devices on the internet. Private IP addresses are typically used for local communication within a network, while public IP addresses are used for communication with external networks. Is there anything else you would like to know about computer networking or web security? I can provide more detailed information and examples if needed. Please let me know if you have any specific questions or topics you would like me to address. WebSockets are a technology that allows for bidirectional communication between a web browser and a server. Unlike the traditional request-response model of the HTTP protocol, WebSockets provide a persistent connection that allows the client and the server to send messages to each other at any time. This allows for real-time communication and the creation of interactive web applications. WebSockets are implemented on the client side using JavaScript, and they require the server to support the WebSocket protocol. The client and the server establish a WebSocket connection by performing a handshake, during which they exchange information and agree on the protocol and parameters for the communication. Once the connection is established, the client and the server can send messages to each other over the WebSocket. WebSockets are typically used for applications that require real-time communication, such as online gaming, chat applications, and collaborative tools. They can also be used for applications that require frequent updates, such as stock tickers and social media feeds. WebSockets provide a more efficient and flexible alternative to traditional techniques such as long polling and server-sent events. Image optimization is the process of reducing the file size of images without reducing the quality of the image. This is important for web applications because smaller images load faster, which improves the performance and user experience of the website. There are many different techniques and tools for image optimization, and some of the key concepts and tools include the following. WebP. WebP is a modern image format that provides superior lossless and lossy compression for images on the web. Compared to other image formats, such as JPEG and PNG, WebP can provide smaller file sizes for the same quality of image. WebP is supported by most modern web browsers, and it can be used to reduce the file size of images on a website. PNG, Portable Network Graphics, is a popular image format that supports lossless compression, which means that the image quality is preserved after the image is compressed. PNG is commonly used for images that require transparency, such as logos and icons. PNG also supports variable transparency, which allows the image to fade from opaque to transparent. ImageOptim. ImageOptim is a free and open-source tool that can optimize images by removing unnecessary metadata and applying lossless compression. ImageOptim can optimize images in a variety of formats, including JPEG, PNG, GIF, and SVG. It also provides a simple user interface that allows users to easily optimize multiple images at once. Overall, image optimization is an important technique for improving the performance and user experience of a website. By using modern image formats and optimization tools, developers can reduce the file size of images and make the website load faster. Minification and bundling are techniques for improving the performance of a website by reducing the size and number of files that are sent to the client. Minification refers to the process of removing unnecessary characters from the source code of a website, such as wiki space, comments, and unused code. This reduces the size of the code, which makes it faster to download and parse by the browser. Minification can be applied to CSS, JavaScript, and other types of code used on a website. Bundling refers to the process of combining multiple files into a single file. This reduces the number of requests that the client needs to make to the server to download the files, which improves the performance of the website. Bundling is typically used for CSS and JavaScript files, but it can also be applied to other types of files, such as images and fonts. Minification and bundling can be performed manually by the developer, or they can be automated using tools such as Webpack and Gulp. These tools can minify and bundle the code as part of the build process, which makes it easier to manage and maintain the optimized website. Overall, minification and bundling are important techniques for improving the performance of a website. By reducing the size and number of files, a website can load faster and provide a better user experience. The critical rendering path is the sequence of steps that the browser goes through to convert the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript of a web page into the final rendered page that is displayed to the user. The critical rendering path is critical because it determines how fast a web page will be displayed to the user. The critical rendering path involves several different steps, including the following. Loading and parsing the HTML. The browser starts by loading and parsing the HTML of the web page. This involves sending a request to the server to fetch the HTML, and then parsing the HTML to extract the content and the structure of the page. Loading and parsing the CSS. The browser then loads and parses the CSS of the web page. This involves sending requests to the server to fetch the CSS files, and then parsing the CSS to extract the styles that apply to the page. Loading and parsing the JavaScript. The browser then loads and parses the JavaScript of the web page. This involves sending requests to the server to fetch the JavaScript files, and then parsing and executing the JavaScript code. Constructing the DOM and XAML. After loading and parsing the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the browser constructs the document object model, DOM, and the CSS object model, XAML, for the page. The DOM represents the structure of the page, and the XAML represents the styles that apply to the page. Rendering the page. Finally, the browser uses the DOM and the XAML to render the page. This involves applying the styles to the content, and then painting the page onto the screen. The critical rendering path is important because it determines how fast a web page will be displayed to the user. By optimizing the critical rendering path, developers can improve the performance and user experience of a website. This can be done by reducing the size and number of files that are loaded, and by optimizing the order in which the files are loaded and parsed. There are many different ways to implement fundamental data structures such as stacks, queues, lists, linked lists, and sets. The specific implementation will depend on the programming language and the requirements of the application. However, some general principles and techniques for implementing these data structures are described below. Stack. A stack is a data structure that allows for the insertion and removal of elements only at the top of the stack. This means that the last element that is inserted into the stack will be the first element that is removed from the stack. A stack can be implemented using an array or a linked list. To implement a stack using an array, the top of the stack can be represented by an index that points to the last element in the array. To implement a stack using a linked list, the top of the stack can be represented by a pointer to the last node in the linked list. Queue. A queue is a data structure that allows for the insertion of elements at the back of the queue, and the removal of elements from the front of the queue. This means that the first element that is inserted into the queue will be the first element that is removed from the queue. A queue can be implemented using an array or a linked list. To implement a queue using an array, the front and back of the queue can be represented by two indices that point to the first and last elements in the array. To implement a queue using a linked list, the front and back of the queue can be represented by two pointers to the first and last nodes in the linked list. List. A list is a data structure that allows for the insertion and removal of elements at arbitrary positions in the list. A list can be implemented using an array or a linked list. To implement a list using an array, the elements in the list can be stored in contiguous memory locations. To implement a list using a linked list, each element in the list can be represented by a node in the linked list, and the nodes can be linked together using pointers. Linked list. A linked list is a data structure that consists of a series of nodes, where each node contains a value and a pointer to the next node in the list. Linked lists are useful for implementing lists and other data structures that require the insertion and removal of elements at arbitrary positions. To implement a linked list, the nodes in the list can be represented by objects or records in the programming language, and the pointers can be represented by references or pointers in the language. Set. A set is a data structure that stores a collection of unique elements, and allows for efficient operations such as adding and removing elements, and checking if an element is in the set. A set can be implemented using an array or a hash table. To implement a set using an array, the elements in the set can be stored in a sorted array, and binary search can be used to add, remove, and find elements in the set. To implement a set using a hash table, the elements in the set can be hashed to compute their index in the table, and the table can be used to store and retrieve the elements. Is there anything else you would like to know about implementing data structures? I can provide more detailed information and examples if needed. Please let me know if you have any specific questions or topics you would like me to address. In React, a component is said to be uncontrolled if it manages its own state, and controlled if it receives its state from a parent component. An uncontrolled component is a component that uses a local state to store and manage the data that is displayed and updated by the component. An uncontrolled component uses the useState hook to define and manipulate its local state, and it uses the value and onChange attributes of the input elements to bind the state to the input fields. Function myInput, const value, set value equals useState, return, set value, e.target.value, /. A controlled component is a component that receives its state from a parent component, and it uses the value and onChange props to bind the state to the input fields. The parent component is responsible for managing and updating the state, and it passes the state and the handler functions down to the controlled component as props. Function myInput, value, onChange, return, function myForm, const value, set value equals useState, return, set value, e.target.value, /. In general, uncontrolled components are easier to implement and use, because they do not require the coordination with a parent component. However, controlled components offer more flexibility and control, because the parent component can manage and update the state of multiple controlled components at once. Therefore, whether to use uncontrolled or controlled components depends on the specific requirements and design of the application. Free research preview, ChatGPT is optimized for dialogue.
Not sure if this is worth putting there, but I think this is more related to the Visual Studio shortcuts. Not sure if the answer is gonna be good, or if I'm even gonna remember after listening to the answer. But I guess I don't lose anything by putting there. think I'll be right back. Uh, this is one I'm not gonna put there. This I also feel like I studied a lot, so CD should change directory, allows to list things, MV to move, CP to copy, RM to remove, and touch to create, so. Maybe I should leave these last ones for... Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that, because they're all related to the same topic. To software design.
Chrome Developer Tools, how to track requests, inspect storage, clear cache, preview website on mobile, simulate slow network. Chrome Developer Tools is a set of web development tools built into the Google Chrome browser. It allows you to track requests, inspect storage, clear cache, preview a website on mobile, and simulate a slow network, among other things. To access the Chrome Developer Tools, you can either right-click on the page and select Inspect or use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+Shift+I, or CMD+Shift+I on a Mac. This will open the Developer Tools in a separate window. To track requests, go to the Network tab in the Developer Tools. This will show you a list of all the requests made by the page, including information such as the request URL, status, type, and size. To inspect storage, go to the Application tab in the Developer Tools. This will show you information about the page's local storage, session storage, and cookies. To clear the cache, go to the Network tab in the Developer Tools and click the Clear Cache button. This will remove any locally cached data for the page. To preview a website on mobile, go to the Toggle Device Toolbar button in the Developer Tools. It looks like a phone and a tablet stacked on top of each other. This will open a preview of the page in mobile mode, allowing you to see how the page will look on a mobile device. To simulate a slow network, go to the Network tab in the Developer Tools and click the Network Conditions button. This will open a menu where you can select a specific network speed or choose to offline to simulate a disconnected network. This can be useful for testing how a page will behave under different network conditions. Cross-browser testing is the practice of ensuring that a website or web application works correctly on different web browsers and across multiple devices. BrowserStack is a tool that allows you to do cross-browser testing. It provides a cloud-based platform where you can test your website or web application on a wide range of different browsers and devices, including mobile devices. With Browser Stack, you can test your website or web application in real time on a wide variety of different browsers, operating systems, and devices. This allows you to quickly identify and fix any compatibility issues that may arise. It also allows
This is actually a good one to write it down. Let me see if I'm writing correctly. Browser stack.
It also allows you to see how your website or web application looks and functions on different browsers and devices, giving you confidence that it will work well for all users. Browser Stack also provides additional features such as screenshot testing, which allows you to take screenshots of your website or web application on different browsers and devices, and local testing, which allows you to test locally hosted pages on a range of different browsers and devices. Overall, Browser Stack is a valuable tool for ensuring that your website or web application works well on a variety of different browsers and devices. It can save you time and effort by allowing you to quickly identify and fix compatibility issues, and it can help you deliver a better experience for your users. Visual Studio Code or equivalent, search and replace, refactor tools, productive extensions, productive shortcuts. Visual Studio Code is a free and open source code editor developed by Microsoft. It is a powerful and feature-rich code editor that is popular among developers. It has a number of built-in tools and features that can help you be more productive, including search and replace, and refactor tools. One of the useful search tools in Visual Studio Code is the find feature. This allows you to search for specific text within your code. You can also use the replace feature to quickly find and replace text in your code. Visual Studio Code also has a number of refactor tools that can help you make changes to your code more easily. For example, the Rename Refactor tool allows you to quickly rename variables or functions throughout your code. In addition to these built-in tools, Visual Studio Code also has a wide range of extensions that you can install to add additional functionality. These extensions can help you be even more productive by providing additional tools and features. Finally, Visual Studio Code has a number of keyboard shortcuts that can help you be more efficient when working with code. For example, you can use the shortcut Ctrl+F, or CMD+F on a Mac, to quickly open the Find feature, or Ctrl+R, or CMD+R on a Mac, to quickly open the Replace feature. Overall, Visual Studio Code is a powerful and feature-rich code editor that can help you be more productive when working with code. Its built-in tools, extensions, and keyboard shortcuts make it a valuable tool for any developer. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript linters are tools that can help you write better code by checking your code for errors and suggesting improvements. To use a linter, you will need to install it first. To install a linter for HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, you will need to use a package manager such as npm for JavaScript, or pip for Python. For example, to install the ESLint linter for JavaScript, you can use the following command: npm install eslint save dev. Once the linter is installed, you can run it on your code by using the appropriate command. For example, to run ESLint on a JavaScript file called script.js, you can use the following command: eslint script.js. The linter will then check your code for errors and suggestions for improvement. It will display the results in the terminal, and may also highlight any errors or suggestions directly in your code editor. To use the linter more effectively, you can configure it to meet your specific needs. For example, you can specify which rules the linter should follow, or enable or disable specific rules. You can also set up the linter to automatically fix certain types of errors when possible. Overall, using a linter can help you write better and more consistent code. It can save you time by catching errors and suggesting improvements, and can help you adhere to best practices and coding standards. Babel is a JavaScript compiler, or pre-compiler, that allows you to use next-generation JavaScript features, even if the browser you are using does not support them yet. It does this by converting newer JavaScript code, such as ES6 or ES7, into backwards compatible versions of JavaScript, such as ES5, that can run on older browsers. To use Babel, you first need to install it using a package manager such as npm. Once Babel is installed, you can use it to compile your code by using the Babel command in the terminal. For example, to compile a file called script.js using Babel, you can use the following command: babel script.js out file script compiled.js. This will convert the code in script.js into a backwards compatible version of JavaScript and save it to a new file called script compiled.js. You can then use this compiled version of your code in older browsers that do not support the newer JavaScript features used in script.js. Babel works by parsing the code in script.js and converting it into an abstract syntax tree, AST. An AST is a tree-like representation of the code that makes it easier to analyze and manipulate. Babel then traverses the AST and applies a series of transformations to the code, converting it into a backwards compatible version of JavaScript. Babel also allows you to use plugins and presets to customize the way it compiles your code. Plugins allow you to add support for specific features or syntax, while presets are pre-configured collections of plugins that provide support for certain versions of JavaScript or for specific frameworks or libraries. Overall, Babel is a powerful and versatile tool that can help you use next-generation JavaScript features even on older browsers. It allows you to write modern JavaScript code and have it automatically converted into a version that is compatible with older browsers, making it easier to develop and maintain your applications. Continuous integration, CI, is a software development practice in which developers regularly integrate their code into a shared repository. This allows the code to be automatically built and tested on a regular basis, ensuring that it remains stable and working properly. Continuous integration is typically done using a CI/CD, continuous integration/continuous deployment, tool, which automates the process of building, testing, and deploying the code. When a developer commits their code to the shared repository, the CI/CD tool automatically runs a series of tests on the code to ensure that it is working properly. If the tests pass, the code is automatically built and deployed to a staging or production environment, where it can be further tested and used by end users. Continuous integration has several benefits. It helps to catch errors and bugs early in the development process, before they become more difficult and time-consuming to fix. It also ensures that the code remains stable and working properly, reducing the risk of downtime or other issues. And it allows for faster, more efficient development, as developers can work in parallel without having to worry about conflicts or integration issues. Overall, continuous integration is a valuable software development practice that can help teams develop and maintain high-quality code more efficiently. It is particularly useful for large teams or projects with complex code bases, as it helps to ensure that the code remains stable and working properly even as it is being developed and updated. Unit testing is a software testing practice in which individual units of code, e.g. functions or classes, are tested to ensure that they are working properly. This allows developers to catch and fix errors or bugs early in the development process, before they become more difficult and time-consuming to fix. Unit testing is useful for several reasons. First, it helps to ensure that individual units of code are working properly and meeting their specified requirements. This can help to prevent errors and bugs from occurring later in the development process, which can save time and effort. Second, unit testing helps to improve the overall quality of the code. By regularly testing individual units of code, developers can identify and fix problems early on, ensuring that the code is as reliable and bug-free as possible. Third, unit testing can also help to make the code more maintainable and easier to change in the future. By testing individual units of code separately, developers can ensure that changes to one part of the code do not affect other parts of the code in unexpected ways. One common technique used in unit testing is mocking. This involves creating fake versions of objects or dependencies that the unit being tested relies on. This allows the unit to be tested in isolation, without the need for the actual objects or dependencies. Mocking can be useful for testing units that have complex or time-consuming dependencies, or for testing units in isolation from other units that they interact with. Overall, unit testing is a valuable practice that can help developers write high-quality, reliable code. It can save time and effort by catching and fixing errors early on, and can help to improve the overall quality and maintainability of the code. Mocha and Jasmine are testing tools that are commonly used in JavaScript development. These tools provide frameworks and libraries that can be used to create and run automated tests for JavaScript code. Mocha and Jasmine both allow developers to write test cases that specify the expected behavior of the code being tested. These test cases can then be run automatically, and the results will be reported to the developer. Mocha and Jasmine both provide a variety of features that can help with writing and running tests. For example, both tools provide the ability to create and run tests in parallel, which can save time when running a large number of tests. They also provide support for asynchronous testing, which is common in JavaScript development. Mocha and Jasmine also provide support for various assertion libraries, which allow developers to write more expressive and readable test cases. These libraries provide functions that can be used to make assertions about the expected behavior of the code being tested, such as whether a certain value is equal to another value. Overall, Mocha and Jasmine are valuable tools for automated testing of JavaScript code. They provide a framework and set of libraries that can be used to write and run a wide variety of test cases, helping to ensure that the code is working properly and meeting its specified requirements. Test-driven development, TDD, is a software development practice in which tests are written before the code they are intended to test. This is done using a red-green refactor cycle, in which the developer follows 3 steps. Write a test that specifies the expected behavior of the code being developed. This test should initially fail, as the code being tested does not yet exist. Write the code that is being tested. This code should be written in a way that makes the test pass. Refactor the code, if necessary, to improve its design or structure without changing its behavior. This step is optional, but it can help to improve the overall quality of the code. The red-green refactor cycle is repeated for each unit of code being developed. This allows developers to focus on writing code that satisfies the tests, rather than writing code first and then testing it. Test-driven development has several benefits. It helps to ensure that the code being developed is working properly and meeting its specified requirements. It also encourages developers to think carefully about the behavior of the code they are writing, leading to better designed and more reliable code. Overall, test-driven development is a valuable software development practice that can help teams develop high-quality, reliable code more efficiently. It encourages a focus on testing and ensures that the code being developed is working properly and meeting its specified requirements. Integration testing is a software testing practice in which individual units of code are combined and tested as a group to ensure that they work together properly. This allows developers to catch and fix errors or bugs that may arise when the units are combined and used in a larger system. Integration testing is typically done after unit testing, as it requires that the individual units of code be working properly on their own before they can be combined and tested as a group. During integration testing, the units are combined and tested as a group to ensure that they are working together correctly and meeting their specified requirements. Integration testing is useful for several reasons. First, it helps to ensure that the units of code are working together properly and meeting their specified requirements when used in a larger system. This can help to prevent errors and bugs from occurring later in the development process, which can save time and effort. Second, integration testing can also help to improve the overall quality of the code. By testing the units of code as a group, developers can identify and fix problems early on, ensuring that the code is as reliable and bug-free as possible. Third, integration testing can also help to make the code more maintainable and easier to change in the future. By testing the units of code as a group, developers can ensure that changes to one part of the code do not affect other parts of the code in unexpected ways. Overall, integration testing is a valuable practice that can help developers write high-quality, reliable code. It can save time and effort by catching and fixing errors early on, and can help to improve the overall quality and maintainability of the code. Free research preview, ChatGPT is optimized for dialogue. Our goal is to make AI systems more natural to interact with, and your feedback will help us improve our systems and make them safer.
I don't feel like modifying these things to get better outputs because I'm probably gonna study these things later anyway, so. And some of them I already studied. So I just wanna see what the output's gonna be for each thing here. This maybe gives me something that might be useful in the future, like this stuff here. Or sometimes it gives some keywords or things like that that are interesting to look further into. And obviously another thing that I can do is use all of this stuff that I wrote down here to make inputs on ChatGPT again and then iterate like that. And I kind of want to study more about neurotransmitters and this other stuff about biology, to be honest, now. I might come back today and study that. Because I have to finish editing the next video that I'm making for the other channel, which is for loops. But I'm having a very difficult time because apparently it's extremely hard to draw a curved arrow in DaVinci Resolve and make an animation. I want to draw curved arrows and be able to change them however I like, because I want to only do that once and then be able to use on all the videos. But obviously I'm not gonna know the size and shape of the arrow before the video because each video is gonna be different. So, but I'm trying to create a template on DaVinci Resolve for a curved arrow. That way I can make it the processing of editing faster. But it's very hard to do, and there's a lot of videos that explain how to do an arrow. Then some of them use paint, but then you have several different ways, and I couldn't find one that it's the way that I wanted to do it. And they don't explain really well how the Fusion page connects with the editing page when you want to create templates and things like that to reuse on other videos. This one I remember that I saw when I was studying Django yesterday. So Django is MVT, model view template, and this is model view controller. And the difference between the two is that the controller has something in between the viewer and the template to manage the flow between the two, something like that. And the template is directly connecting the view and the template. But I'm gonna put it again. And most of these things I'm gonna forget anyway, because your brain forgets most things. So that's why it's necessary to have spaced repetition. And the reason why is because if you remembered everything that you experience, it would be inefficient. So in order to remember things, you have to make your brain place importance on it. That's why some techniques to remember things are to make them outside of the norm or attach them to an emotional state. And that's what music does as well. So you have these anchors that you can use and people use, but then the problem with anchors is that you can't use them all the time, otherwise they lose their meaning. So it's a double-edged sword type of thing. But if you use something like the castle of the mind, which is you pick a place that is familiar to you, and then you put these concepts in a distorted way, in a funny way that doesn't make sense inside of the context that you're used to, it's easier to remember. And some people do that, but I'm not doing that because it is it's time consuming. It's difficult to do in the beginning because you have to keep track of, you have to force yourself. I suspect it's just like anything else, that in the beginning is really hard, and then the more you do it, the easier it gets, but I haven't done that yet. Maybe I should try to do it. It takes some effort as well to come up with, I think the best way is to come up with a story to remember things. So that way you associate multiple different concepts, and then you make the, for example, you could turn model view controller into a character that has the initials MVC or something like that. And then, yeah, but then you have to think about how you're gonna translate the concept into the image. That's why it's a little bit annoying to do that. I prefer just doing the spaced repetition stuff because although it's less effective, it's easier to implement. So because it's easier to create a habit to do things than, but maybe I should try to do the castle of the mind kind of thing. Damn. So it's not familiar with this model. Interesting. Oh, this is just recommendations of projects. Yeah, I'm not gonna do this. Oh, so MBC is a language, apparently. But maybe not. Yeah, so I'm not gonna do this one. Yeah, this one I also don't think it makes sense, because it's not gonna give me a good response. Yeah, and this is the beginning of the... I think I did this before the whole visualization thing. So I was thinking about that probably, this file. Yeah, so I guess that's it for this file.
Refactoring is the process of improving the structure and organization of existing code without changing its behavior. One common technique for refactoring is the rule of 3, which suggests that code should be refactored whenever the same piece of logic is repeated 3 or more times in a program. This rule is based on the idea that if a piece of logic is repeated more than twice, it is likely to be used in more than one place in the code, which can make the code harder to maintain and update. Another principle often used in refactoring is the dry, don't repeat yourself principle, which suggests that every piece of knowledge in a program should have a single, unambiguous representation. This means that if the same information is used in multiple places in a program, it should be represented by a single variable or function, rather than being repeated throughout the code. This can help to make code easier to read, maintain, and update. Good principles: divide and conquer, reduce coupling, increase reusability, designing for flexibility, defensive programming. There are many principles that can guide good software design, and which principles are considered good can depend on the context and goals of a particular project. Some common principles that are often considered good include: divide and conquer. This principle suggests that complex problems should be divided into smaller, more manageable sub-problems, and that each sub-problem should be solved independently. This can help to make a problem more tractable, and can also make it easier to reuse and repurpose solutions to sub-problems in other contexts. Reduce coupling. Coupling refers to the degree to which different parts of a program are interconnected and dependent on each other. High coupling can make a program harder to understand and maintain, because changing one part of the program can have unforeseen effects on other parts of the program. The principle of reducing coupling suggests that different parts of a program should be designed to be as independent and self-contained as possible, to make the program more modular and flexible. Increase reusability. Reusability refers to the degree to which a piece of code can be used in different contexts and for different purposes. Code that is highly reusable can save time and effort, because it can be easily adapted and integrated into new projects without having to be rewritten from scratch. Designing for reusability involves identifying common patterns and components in a program, and abstracting them into reusable functions, modules, or libraries. Designing for flexibility. Flexibility refers to the ability of a program to adapt to changing requirements and environments. A flexible program can be easily modified and extended to handle new situations, without requiring significant rework or redesign. Designing for flexibility involves anticipating potential changes and designing the program in a way that makes it easy to accommodate those changes without breaking existing functionality. Defensive programming. Defensive programming is a style of programming that emphasizes the prevention of errors, rather than relying on error handling code to clean up after errors occur. This can involve techniques like checking inputs for validity, using assertions to enforce invariance, and writing comprehensive unit tests to ensure that the program behaves as expected. The goal of defensive programming is to make a program more robust and reliable, by proactively identifying and addressing potential problems. Is there anything specific you would like me to continue explaining? I'm a large language model trained by OpenAI, so I have a broad knowledge base and can help with many topics, but I need a bit more direction to provide the most useful information. Diagrams are visual representations of information that can help to communicate complex ideas and relationships in a more intuitive and accessible way. There are many different types of diagrams that can be used for different purposes, but some common types of diagrams used in software design include user flow diagrams and UML, Unified Modeling Language, diagrams. A user flow diagram is a type of diagram that shows the steps and decisions involved in a user's interaction with a product or system. User flow diagrams can be used to document the user's journey through a website, application, or other system, from the initial trigger that prompts them to take action, to the final outcome of their interaction. User flow diagrams can be useful for identifying potential bottlenecks, confusion, or frustration points in the user's experience, and for planning improvements to the user's journey. UML, Unified Modeling Language, is a standardized language for specifying, visualizing, and documenting the design of a software system. UML diagrams are used to represent the structure, behavior, and interactions of the components in a software system, and can help to communicate the design of a system to stakeholders, such as developers, project managers, and business analysts. UML diagrams can include many different types of diagrams, such as class diagrams, sequence diagrams, and state diagrams, each of which represents a different aspect of the system's design. The Model View Controller, MVC, design pattern is a software design pattern that is commonly used in the development of graphical user interface, GUI, applications. The MVC pattern separates the application into three main components: the model, the view, and the controller. The model is the data and business logic of the application. It represents the state of the application and defines the rules for how the data can be manipulated and modified. The view is the user interface of the application. It is responsible for rendering the data from the model in a form that the user can interact with, such as by displaying a list of items or a form for editing an item. The controller is the glue that binds the model and the view together. It receives user input from the view, such as when a user clicks a button or fills out a form, and uses the input to update the model or to control the behavior of the view. The MVC pattern has several advantages, including the separation of concerns, which makes it easier to manage the complexity of a large application, and the separation of the user interface from the business logic, which makes it easier to update the user interface without affecting the rest of the application. I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with the MVC design pattern. It's possible that this is a variant of the Model View Controller, MVC, pattern that I mentioned earlier, but I cannot be certain without further information. As a large language model trained by OpenAI, I have a broad knowledge base, but I don't have access to the internet and my knowledge is limited to what I was trained on, which includes common software design patterns like MVC, but not necessarily every possible variant or custom implementation. If you have any further questions or need more information, I'd be happy to help if I can. Free research preview: ChatGPT is optimized for dialogue. Our goal is to make AI systems more natural to interact with, and your feedback will help us improve our systems and make them safer.
Well, maybe this is a good one to go over as well. But I don't think it's gonna give me a lot of good responses, because it's too generic. So it's gonna give me just some superficial response, and yeah, but maybe it's interesting to put there as well. I think I'll do this one because there isn't a lot of things here. Let's see this one. I kind of feel like doing more of this today. 'Cause I just want to finish all of this stuff. I want to study everything, obviously. All of these files. And if I do just two of them by day, then it takes too long. So, but I think I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna do this one now, and then I'm gonna stop. Then I'm gonna work on the editing stuff, and then maybe later I'll come back. Not sure why I wrote this down, but I'm gonna put there. Hopefully I'm able to. The problem is that there's a lot of stuff to do on the other video, a lot of stuff to highlight. I'm probably gonna end up doing the easiest way, which is to do just a normal arrow and then just do it manually. But I have to study all of this stuff so I get better and eventually I can figure out how to do templates. So I don't have to do the same work all the time. I'm also gonna probably sacrifice on the visualization of the stuff that I was thinking about doing. I was thinking about drawing a circle for each time the loop runs and then showing that each time there is a one element of the array, so it's visually easy to understand that when you're running the loop is going one by one in the elements of the array. But I think that's gonna be too much work for to represent that, and it might take too long to figure out. Because I'm thinking about doing with the paint in DaVinci Resolve, the paint feature, but I'm not sure how to make it work. I was trying to make it work yesterday, but it didn't work. It doesn't show anything in the page. Yeah, but if I'm able to do at least to get close to finish, maybe I'll come back and then continue to study this stuff. Because I want to finish. I'm also in the mood or inspired to study about the brain. As I was doing this stuff, I was having some ideas about. I was remembering because I have to eat in a few minutes, or not in a few minutes, but I have to eat a meal between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., I think. And then I was thinking about the diet and then the nutritionist and the stuff that she told me. And then I went back to GPT about the transductor stuff. And then I was thinking about the correlation between the food, the complexity of the food you eat, the complex carbohydrates take longer for to release insulin in your brain because insulin is the hormone in your blood that's not in your brain, in your blood that carries glucose, and then there's this correlation between how complex the food is and how the hormone cycles in your blood, and that changes the frequency in your brain. So there is this correlation between the complexity of food and the dynamic of the flow of the blood, and obviously the thoughts you have, because the thoughts are related to the synapses, which are related to the blood flow and the chemistry inside of the blood, the brain. And I was thinking about making a spreadsheet with all the hormones on the body, so I understand more what is the flow of everything and how that's related to the food you eat, because it's something that is very interesting to me. But I have to finish this stuff first before I study that, I think. Because this is the priority for using ChatGPT. I asked on their Discord, but then there's 300,000 people in Discord, and then there's a bunch of people that are wasting time just messaging a bunch of shit that doesn't matter. So I think it's gonna be hard for them to see the message, and probably not gonna know. But hopefully they make it free. They keep it like this for a long time. But it's hard to know. Obviously, they can make it pay tomorrow, and then I potentially couldn't finish the stuff here. So I have to do this as fast as possible, I think. Because this is clearly very useful. A lot more useful than searching these topics on Google. It's just a lot more convenient and faster. And obviously I have to be careful because a lot of these topics there could be misleading information. But I think with the knowledge that I have now already, I can deduce with logic and just the overall picture. I think I have a good intuition to see if something is off or not. And it's just more of it's like I'm gonna rely completely on this. It's just to get exposure, let's say, for spaced repetition. So in case in the future I use these topics, I'm already gonna have a good idea, which is what I've been doing for a long time. But yeah, because a lot of these topics that I'm searching here are already studied on my own, and then it's good to keep exposing yourself, reviewing. That way you're downloading the information in your body. And that's the way that I think. Everything you experience, your information experience, is like you're downloading into the hardware of your body. And that's the distribution of conscious and subconscious. The subconscious mind is your body. And I think the information you listen to and learn through the electromagnetic field gets uploaded into your body. So that's why spaced repetition works. The more you expose yourself to something, the more ingrained it becomes into the whole structure of your body. And you work like this funnel of information throughout the synapses in the body. I think that's the last one there. Ajax call. JavaScript. I'm gonna do the Italian thing as well after I finish this one. To just put the text to speech and practice the Italian stuff. If I can be more frequent with that, it's gonna be great because I'm not sure if I'm learning much by doing this. A lot of the words are similar to Portuguese, so it just feels it's not that hard, but I think in order to be able to really learn, I have to put them in a context. So I'm gonna have to switch it up the methods, but I think I'm gonna stay like this for a long time until I really get familiar with the at least 200 words, because the lists that I have here are the 200. No, they are the 1,000 most frequent used words in Italian. So yeah, once I get really familiar with them, then I have to think about a way to use the text to speech. Maybe create some code or something that creates text, or maybe I can use ChatGPT. That's a good idea. Yeah, I didn't think about that. But maybe because it's in Italian, it's not gonna work. Maybe yeah, that sounds like an interesting idea actually. because I can get a list of words in Italian, and then I can ask ChatGPT, can you create text using only these words? Oh, that sounds like a very interesting idea, actually. Maybe I'll do this tomorrow or Monday, because that way I could have a text that has context, and through reading the text, it's gonna be better to understand how or to get familiar with the phrases and stuff like that, because just remembering the words is not enough, I think, to learn. But I'm not in a rush, obviously. Like, it's just something, because it's one of those things that the devil is on the details. So the stuff that you do every day compounds over time, and then that's how I'm looking at it. So I want to do as least as possible, but make sure that I'm frequent with it, and then eventually I can build on top of that. Because time is gonna pass anyway, and then at some point I'm probably gonna definitely never gonna be know a lot about the language, but I'm probably gonna be able to understand what people are saying, which is good enough for me. Yeah, I think that's it. So
The code you've provided is using the jQuery function to select elements in the DOM document object model. In this case, it is selecting elements with a div element that have the ID attribute set to content, and that also have a class attribute with a value head. Here's how it works. The function is used to select elements in the DOM. You can provide a CSS selector inside the function to specify which elements you want to select. The div hashtag content part of the selector is selecting all div elements that have an ID attribute with the value content. The hashtag symbol is used in CSS selectors to specify an ID attribute. The .head part of the selector is selecting all elements that have a class attribute with the value head. The symbol is used in CSS selectors to specify a class attribute. So, in this case, the $div hashtag content.head code is selecting all elements with a class attribute of head that are descendants of a div element with an ID attribute of content. If you're not familiar with jQuery or CSS selectors, I'd recommend doing some reading to learn more about them. There are plenty of tutorials and resources available online that can help you get started. In jQuery, you can use the .on method to attach event handlers to elements in the DOM. This method allows you to specify the type of event you want to listen for, e.g. click, mouse over, key down, etc., in a function that will be called when the event occurs. Here's an example of how you might use the .on method to attach a click event handler to a button. $button, .on, click, function, / this function will be called when the button is clicked. In this example, the .on method is being called on a jQuery object that contains a button element. The first argument to the .on method is the event type we want to listen for, click, and the second argument is a function that will be called when the event occurs. You can also use the .on method to attach event handlers to elements that haven't been added to the DOM yet. For example, if you're creating new elements dynamically and want to attach event handlers to them, you can use the .on method in the following way. $document, .on. In this example, the .on method is being called on the document element, which is the root element of the DOM. The first argument is the event type, click, and the second argument is a selector that specifies which elements the event handler should be attached to, in this case, button. This means that the event handler will be attached to all button elements, even if they are added to the DOM after the event handler is attached. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any. To attach an event listener to multiple elements at once using jQuery, you can use the .on method and provide a CSS selector that matches the elements you want to attach the event listener to. For example, if you have a bunch of button elements on your page and you want to attach a click event listener to all of them, you could do something like this. $button, .on, click, function, / this function will be called when any of the button elements are clicked. In this code, the $button part of the code is selecting all button elements on the page. The .on method is then being called on this jQuery object, and the first argument is the event type, click, and the second argument is a function that will be called when the event occurs. Another way you can attach event listeners to multiple elements at once is by using a delegated event handler. This is a bit more advanced, but it allows you to attach an event listener to a parent element, and then specify which child elements the event should be handled for. This is useful if you have a lot of elements on your page, and you don't want to attach an event listener to each one individually. Here's an example of how you might use a delegated event handler to attach a click event listener to all button elements that are descendants of a div element with an ID of content. $div hashtag. In this code, the $div hashtag content part of the code is selecting the div element with an ID of content. The .on method is then being called on this jQuery object, and the first argument is the event type, click, and the second argument is a selector that specifies which child elements the event should be handled for, in this case, button. This means that the event listener will be attached to all button elements that are descendants of the div hashtag content element. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. The eval function should never be used to run JavaScript code. The eval function is a global function in JavaScript that allows you to execute a string of code as if it were actual JavaScript code. This can be very dangerous, because it allows user-provided input to be executed as code, which can open up your application to security vulnerabilities. Here's an example of how the eval function might be used. var code equals console.log, hello, world, eval. In this example, the eval function is being called with a string of code as an argument. When the eval function is called, it will execute the code in the code variable. This can be very dangerous, because if the code variable contains user-provided input, that input could be executed as code, which could potentially cause harm to your application. For this reason, the eval function should never be used to run JavaScript code. There are other, safer ways to execute code in JavaScript, such as using the function constructor or the new function syntax. These methods allow you to create a new function from a string of code, but they do not execute the code immediately like the eval function does. I hope this helps. Let me know. To make an AJAX call in JavaScript, you need to set up several properties on an XML HTTP request object. These properties include the URL of the request, the HTTP method to use, e.g. get, post, etc., and any request headers or data that need to be sent with the request. Here's an example of how you might set up an XML HTTP request object to make an AJAX call. var request equals new XML HTTP request, / set the URL of the request.open, get, https / www.exam. In this code, an XML HTTP request object is being created using the XML HTTP request constructor. The .open method is then being called on the request object, and it is being passed the HTTP method, get, and the URL of the request, https / www. Next, the .set request header method is being called on the request object to set the request headers. In this example, the content type header is being set to application/JSON, and the authorization header is being set to bearer ABC123. Finally, the .send method is being called on the request object, and it is being passed the request data, if any, as an argument. In this example, the request data is a JSON object that contains a user ID property with a value of 123. Once all of these properties have been set up, the XML HTTP request object will be ready to make an AJAX call. When the .send method is called, the request will be sent to the specified URL, and the server's response will be handled by any event listeners that have been attached to the request object.
Whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna do this thing here, and then I'm gonna bounce.
Fa,
Fa,
does,
fisso,
fisso,
set, unchanging,
3,
3,
3,
desiderare,
desiderare,
desire,
aria,
aria,
air,
bene,
bene,
well,
anche,
anche,
also,
giocare,
giocare,
play,
piccolo,
piccolo,
small,
fine,
fine,
end,
mettere,
mettere,
put,
casa,
casa,
home,
leggere,
leggere,
read,
mano,
mano,
hand,
portare,
portare,
carry,
grande,
grande,
large,
compitare,
compitare,
spell, words,
aggiungere,
aggiungere,
add,
anche,
anche,
even, also,
terra,
terra,
land,
qui,
qui,
here,
devo,
devo,
I must,
grande,
grande,
big,
alto,
alto,
high, tall,
tale,
tale,
such,
seguire,
seguire,
follow,
atto,
atto,
enact,
perché,
perché,
why,
chiedere,
chiedere,
ask,
maschi,
maschi,
men,
cambiamento,
cambiamento,
a change,
è andato,
è andato,
he, she went,
luce,
luce,
light,
tipo,
tipo,
kind, of thing,
spento,
spento,
turned off,
bisogno,
bisogno,
need,
casa,
casa,
house,
immagine,
immagine,
image,
provare,
provare,
try,
noi,
noi,
us,
di nuovo,
di nuovo,
again,
animale,
animale,
animal,
punto,
punto,
point,
madre,
madre,
mother,
mondo,
mondo,
world,
vicino,
vicino,
near,
costruire,
costruire,
build,
se stesso,
se stesso,
himself,
terra,
terra,
earth,
padre,
padre.
father,
Just gonna see. Damn. That's crazy, actually. It asked me a question. What the fuck? Va bene, qual è il tema dell'articolo? So it's asking me what is the theme of the article that it wants me to write it. Potresti fornirmi alcune informazioni. Notizie per iniziare. Can be that's very strange. Because he usually doesn't ask any questions. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, but this is really interesting. You can speak in Italian as well. So I definitely think it's probably gonna be interesting. What I'm thinking about is taking the words I have there, the 1,000 most frequent words, and then asking it to do an article only using those words. And then I can copy that article into a file and then do the text to speech for the file, and then I can listen to the article. But maybe I should use only 50 words at a time for the article, but then I'm not sure if it's gonna be able to write anything. So I have to think about a combination of the two, where it writes the article and then somehow it highlights because I have to combine the words that I'm memorizing now, listening to and repeating with them in a context, so it's better to understand or better to remember what each thing means. But it's actually reading this stuff is actually not that different than it is obviously different than Portuguese, but it doesn't feel like it's hard to understand what is saying. So it's saying in this case, I propose to write an article. This one I don't know, but I think is about the beauty of the nature in Italy. So fauna grande varietà di flora e fauna. So it's saying there's a big variety of flora and fauna in Italy. Yeah, I think I can read this and understand it. Which is kind of crazy to think about. And this actually is really weird to me because it's the first time that it happens, where I ask something and then it replies with an answer, with a question, and then it questions me again after I say yes. And the reason why it's really crazy is because if you think about it, it's just a language model with a bunch of data. So how are the words that I'm typing connected with these inputs? That's the thing that is crazy to think about. Because I'm only writing these words and then somehow it becomes this thing. So maybe I'll ask this question again after resetting or another time to see if I get the same output. Because I also suspect that because I've seen in Twitter that some people get different outputs for the same question. So I think it depends as well when you're writing the thing. It's interesting to think about. Yeah, but I may come back today depending on how far I go with this DaVinci Resolve stuff and the editing of the video, which I have no idea if I'm gonna be able, depending on how hard it's gonna be to create the templates. I think I'm gonna do the simple edits stuff, but it might take a long time because I'm gonna try to figure out how to do the painting on DaVinci Resolve inside of the thing, so I can do circles and so I can do some animations maybe. But I might also, because today I'm in the mood to study this stuff here. I want to do as much as possible, I think, of these things here. So I might come back, but not 100% sure. And if not, I'm probably gonna come back very soon because I'm gonna try to be very frequent with these streams. So yeah, very consistent.